I'm Mayor Paul Winfield, mayor of the great city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, and I have the distinct pleasure of bringing forth three dynamic speakers for this afternoon session. Many of you may know this, but Vicksburg is home to the Army Corps of Engineers and the Mississippi River Valley Division. We're also home to the Engineer Research and Development Center, which is one of the premier research laboratories for the federal government. And so we have a relatively large government presence in the Vicksburg community. And Vicksburg has many significant roots with the creation of the Waterways, formerly Waterways Experiment Station, which evolved into URDIC. Today, I am honored to be here, and I as well take my hats off to Mayor Slay for taking the initiative and the foundation for putting together this initiative. And we look forward to working in the future with the rest of you mayors and this partnership that we put together. I would like to introduce to you Colonel Christopher G. Hall. Colonel Hall is commander of the St. Louis District. Also joining us to Mr. Hall's right is Paul Rohde. Mr. Rohde is Vice President of the Midwest area of the Waterways Council. And directly to the right of Mr. Rohde is Mr. Dennis Meyer. And I thank you for telling me the correct pronunciation. I didn't want to slaughter your name. Mr. Meyer is president of the Inland Rivers and Ports and Terminals Association. This discussion today is going to be involving cities, navigation, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and how we can quite possibly work together towards making improvements with the Mississippi River. As we all are aware, we're meeting to talk about this platform, and we find, I'm sure we're going to find that their input as well as input from the mayors will be very invaluable to help equip us as we move forward with providing support for the navigation of the river. Now, gentlemen, each of you are going to have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and at the end of your respective presentations, we'll open the floor for any questions that may be asked, and I may even have a couple of questions that have been prepared for me. So with that being said, Colonel Hall.
This on? Okay. I'm up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Winfield, for that introduction. It is a pleasure for me to represent the Corps of Engineers here this afternoon. You talked about those dynamic speakers. I think you got the replacement crew here. But anyhow, I'm not going to speak for these two guys. But yeah, you asked for the Director of Civil Works, and you got me. So here we are.
He's already stealing my material.
Yeah. The theme of water quality. I heard a lot of mayors talking about their drinking water and how good it tasted. I just want to remind everybody, I was up in Chicago last year, and one of the guys on the tour boat was talking about how back in the day when the Illinois River was basically an open sewer and all of the sewage flowed down as it does past St. Louis, and there was this good old boy named Anheuser-Busch that pumped that water out of the Mississippi River and brewed beer, bottled it, and shipped it back to Chicago. So I think maybe Mayor Slay was talking about the Budweiser that's brewed here in St. Louis. Anyhow, what I would like to do is really just take a few minutes. I'm going to kind of walk through kind of high level to low level, looking at the big picture USACE, just a couple comments, then looking at the relevance of our region in the Mississippi Valley, certainly near and dear to all of us here, and then just a few comments on locally impacts here in St. Louis, and also with the theme of navigation, obviously, is what we're going to be talking about on this panel. But one of the things I was thinking about as I was listening to some of the comments this morning was all of us, and I have a much greater appreciation for it now, but just the sheer dynamics of this river In April of last year, we were at about 35 feet on the St. Louis gauge. Today, we're at -2. So, and of course, that varies, in every one of your communities and towns up and down the river. That delta is different, but it's no matter where you are on the river, it's a significant delta. So, we do live and operate around, in and on a very, very dynamic natural feature called the Mississippi River. If you can follow along on the slides that were passed out, slide 2 just kind of talks about what we do at the high level. The Corps is a very, very unique organization. We are a part of the Department of Defense. The Chief of Engineers answers to the Chief of Staff of the Army. He also answers and works with the Deputy Secretary for Civil Works, the Department of the Army. And so he's got a very difficult job, and it's a very unique organization in that we have these 35,000 strong civilians and roughly 700 uniformed military that come together as the nation's federal engineer. And it's really an exciting time to be in the Corps. Just recently, coming out of the New Orleans hurricane and some of the successes that we've seen, it's not perfect, it's not there, but just some of the great news that's coming out of the investments that were made down there in the last couple of years, and how that's all turned out to be pretty positive, as well as what we learned last year. As we all know, a lot of you have already talked about the floods of 2011 and the MRCTI project, how that's worked. And then also a little bit further up in our neck of the woods here and up north, the continued success that we have in our environmental management program. Last year we celebrated our 25-year anniversary in that particular program, as we invest in the restoration of the natural features of the river and the ecosystem restoration, as we enhance our habitat and balance that use of the river, the working river, and also understanding that we need to balance the water quality as well. We construct, maintain, and operate key infrastructure projects that contribute to the nation's economy. We understand that. We balance that with the environment and the safety and quality of life of our public. So those are some pretty dynamic pieces to balance. And I know probably every one of you has a story in here of how that's played out in your local communities between safety of the public, economic investment, water quality, environmental balancing. It's a very dynamic process and a very difficult balance to achieve. We're also prepared and ready to provide support to contingency operations, stability efforts, disaster response. Just to give you an idea, over the last 11 years of conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Corps has deployed over 11,000 civilians in support of those operations. So just a huge diversity of mission sets, and I wouldn't even be able to touch on it in 15 minutes, but just to give you appreciation for the wide expanse of things that we're involved in. But I would just like to end up with this slide on the fact that, we have the real key point here is we've got centuries of experience, literally centuries of experience in working in water resources and associated infrastructure, and also the technical expertise that goes along with that. And that's really, one of the key takeaways is that's what the Corps brings to the fight, is that just tremendous amount of experience over, almost 200 years of operating on the rivers and lakes of our country as we've worked to help with the country's economic and infrastructure development. The next slide there just kind of talks about where we are. Briefly, just geographically, as we cover the continental United States, Europe, and the Far East, and the Middle East, and pretty much every continent in the world. We're divided up into 9 divisions. Here in St. Louis, we're part of the Mississippi Valley Division. As Mayor Winfield mentioned, headquarters in Vicksburg, Mississippi. 46 districts, 9 centers and labs to include things like the Engineering Research and Development Center down, formerly the Waterways Experimentation Station in Vicksburg, the Cold Weather Research Lab up in Hanover, New Hampshire. We have just not far from here in Champaign, Illinois, is our Structures Lab. So fairly diverse in that area as well. Also, currently a presence in over 30 countries across the world and providing some type of technical support, whether reach back or physically, in over 100 countries. The next slide. Our projects totaled and combined that we manage in terms of water resource and certainly our navigation projects fit into that category, valued at over $165 billion, are all in some way either directly generating jobs or indirectly generating jobs, certainly facilitating our country's import and exports, and also contributing to a stronger economy and quality of life for Americans. I would also like to point out, the point was made again earlier this morning, and certainly of note on the upper Mississippi River, is the importance of the Corps being involved as the nation's largest provider of outdoor recreation opportunities. So not something that people typically see the Corps as, but certainly one of the key things that we're involved in nationally as well. Also, largest owner and operator of hydroelectric power plants in the United States, and one of the largest in the world, providing 3% of our total national electrical capacity. The next slide, looking at some of our civil works facts and figures, just a couple of things I would like to point out, and that is, the maintenance of 12,000 miles of inland waterways, which is comprised of 239 locks and 193 sites. This is the guts of our country's inland navigation system. Also, in concert with that, certainly here on the Mississippi, is our Corps Levee Safety Program, which operates and maintains about 2,000 miles of levees, and an estimated, additionally, about almost 15,000 miles nationwide. And just as a note, the operation of the Mississippi River tributaries system this past during the spring of 2011 saved roughly about $118 billion in damages. So what we feel is a pretty strong success story. It doesn't come without a price, but certainly the savings there in terms of damages mitigated is huge. I talked about the nation's largest provider of outdoor recreation at about, just to give you an idea, annually about 370 million visitors a year. And I can tell you here in the St. Louis area, about 14 million. So obviously for small towns in the upper river, in the pooled portion of the river, that's a big deal. Recreation is a significant economic driver. Looking at our national water resource challenges, and this is the next slide. One of the certainly one of the largest challenges we face here on the river is the aging infrastructure, and we'll get into a little bit more of that here as I move through the briefing. But really, the importance is, and the importance that organizations like this play in that is not only providing a level of unity of effort between communities and stakeholders on the river, but also communicating with one voice what those critical needs are that we need in order to reinvest and make sure that this infrastructure remains viable for the future. Slide 7. This is kind of shifting nationally down to the regional level. Why is this? We've talked about the economic value. We've talked about, and we're kind of shifting here to navigation. And I would just, there's a Stratfor article that is out there that talks about why has the United States historically been positioned to be a great power in our world. And this is a widely publicized in strategic thinking circles. The Stratfor magazine is very highly regarded. And one of the premises of this article is the fact that the Mississippi River, the third largest watershed in the world, and if you draw a circle around the Mississippi River Basin, and then the other two large watersheds, number 1 is the Amazon, and number 2 is the Congo in central Western Africa. The difference is there's 2 major differences. Number 1, the Mississippi is overlain on some of the richest agriculturally producing area in the world. Number 2, it is also linked with the largest inland navigation system on the globe. So that combination of things makes the Mississippi watershed and the associated navigation system a huge strategic advantage for our country. In that, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if you're a corn producer in Brazil, by a factor of 10, more expensive for you to ship your commodity to the world market than it is for a corn producer in, say, Missouri or Illinois or Wisconsin. And that's not always going to be the case, depending upon our reinvestment strategy in the future for this great system that we have. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So if we go to slide 11 in commercial navigation, our river moves roughly about 47% of all the U.S. inland waterborne navigation. That's a pretty significant number. So that's all commodities. Inland navigation somehow moves up and down the Mississippi River, which is about almost 500 million tons of cargo. And everything from petroleum to crude oil materials, food, soybeans, corn, chemicals, etc. And the fact that this great inland water system is connected to our countries and one of the world's largest ports in New Orleans. One of the other significant points I'd like to make about just here in the city of St. Louis is the fact that we are also at the terminus of the opened navigable portion of the river. So we really do have two rivers in one in terms of inland navigation. We have an open portion, and we have the pooled portion or the lock portion north of St. Louis. So this point, and certainly, probably the reason why St. Louis is here is that it was the last point on the river that was reasonably navigable over most of the year throughout history. And of course, as we've put in the lock and dam system north of here, has become a critical transfer point and transition point in the intermodal system. So roads, rails, waterborne traffic, and potentially airborne traffic, this is a logical connection point here in St. Louis, which makes it a significant point in the system. Let me shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to kind of close out here on what our significant risks are going forward. Of our 221 locks in the Corps portfolio, the average age is about 60 years old. Many of them are well over that. In fact, 70% of the locks on the upper Mississippi River in Illinois are between 61 and 80 years old. The other point to make on this particular system, both the Illinois and the upper Mississippi, with the exception of 3 locks, is they're single chamber locks. Unlike the Ohio, there is no redundancy in the system. If, for instance, in Mayor Smiley's Clarksville, Missouri, where we have our lock and dam 24, if that chamber goes out, there is no bypass route. The system is closed at that point. And that is a huge point that we continue to try and make with all of our legislative partners at all levels, to understand that it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. And it is a huge economic impact if that were to happen. In fact, if 1% of the Mississippi River's waterborne commerce was transferred to the road, just 1%, it would require 265 additional trucks on our U.S. highway system. That's only 1%. As an example, looking at an 18-day planned closure on the Ohio River in 2006, based on some miter gate failures, we looked at over a $40 million cost to the industry because of that closure. So we can only imagine that if we had a catastrophic failure in one of these aging pieces of infrastructure, the impacts that it would have to our system economically. We are working, I believe, the best we can with the O&M dollars that we have. Over the last 3 years, we've had some pretty good success with the ERA funds that came our way. I know here at Lock and Dam 27 in St. Louis, about over $30 million were invested to rehab that facility, which is, again, the last lock on the river going downstream and the first one going upstream, so a key point in the system. But we still have a fairly significant backlog in the range of billions of dollars just in the upper Mississippi system with regards to getting these particular pieces of infrastructure up to a level of reliability and away from any potential catastrophic failure. The last thing I would like to leave you with is the quote, the last slide there by General Bostic, our new chief. You know, our mission in serving the Army and our nation, and one of the other key takeaways that I would like to highlight is the fact that we deal with an amazing spectrum of people, organizations, entities, from, I like to illustrate with folks, in one venue, I'll be sitting in the minority House leader's office in the Capitol talking one particular issue, and on the other end of the spectrum, I'm sitting with a couple old boys in their kitchen down in Nutwood, Illinois, talking the same issue on the other end of the spectrum. So one of the things that I think is unique about the Corps, and that is also a tremendous asset, is the fact that we do talk to everybody. And that I believe that is one of our strengths, and one of the things that you all can use us for is that kind of that common denominator, if you will, to work through some of these what can be seeming very daunting issues at your level. So with that, I'm going to turn over my time, and I think, Paul, you're up next.
Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you. We've been on panels before with Col Holland and Dennis, and it's nice to not have a PowerPoint and I can talk to you. The Corps loves to give PowerPoints. They're great at it. I asked Colonel asked me, well, what do I do? I can't do a PowerPoint. I said, well, there's technology challenges. with that.
Not true.
And I said, well, you know, give me a technology bit of advice. He said, if you don't want anybody to steal your Wi-Fi at home, rename it FBI surveillance van. So thank you, Colonel, for that. I appreciate the advice. I'm going to focus specifically on river navigation. The Colonel did an excellent job talking about the many things the Corps has been asked to do, and now and for a while with limited dollars and shrinking dollars. And that's a real challenge from the navigation community. He mentioned we have 12,000 miles of commercially navigable rivers. They ship products to and from 38 states, getting products to the cities and towns, those products that are needed at the lowest cost, and in some cases products that aren't available to be shipped by rail or truck. 22% of our nation's coal, 15% of other domestic petroleum products, 60% of the grain exports, our agricultural exports, moved right through the Mississippi in that case. A value of cargo at $200 billion, and that doesn't include the transportation savings, which I'll talk in a minute, by having the low-cost provider for transportation in our inland river system. 800,000 American jobs dependent on our waterways, and additional 30,000 Americans employed on the boats and the barges that operate our national river system. But you have to have a reliable channel, and you need to have a reliable infrastructure in order to take advantages of this great resource that we have in our river system. For the upper Miss, that's locks and dams. Colonel talked about that a little bit. I'll mention that in a moment. For the lower Miss, that's typically dredging. This year, our drought and low river stages have been a challenge. With locks, we've got two major issues. The age and condition the Colonel talked about. These would all be drawing pension now if there were people, some literally on the Register of Historic Places, being asked to perform at the same reliability and efficiency as the 1940s when they were 1930s and 40s when they were put in. Most are approaching 80 years of age, and they're the other issue is capacity. They're half the size of the tows that move along the upper Miss. They're undersized. That requires separating the barges in order to go through a lock, usually in two stages. It's dangerous. It's expensive. It impacts market opportunity and cost. And Colonel, you said something that struck me. The recapitalization of our lock and dam infrastructure isn't, and I'm going to paraphrase you, but it's not whether we do it, it's rather how long can we continue to go down the path we're going before something really serious is going to happen and it breaks down. The lock and dam system nationally received by the American Society of Civil Engineers a D- grade in its most recent evaluation. You mentioned 60% of our nation's locks are over 50 years of age. That is well past their intended design life. A staggering 39% are 70 years or older, and most of that, as you mentioned, are on the upper Miss. All but 3 of them on the upper were built before or during the Works Progress Administration, putting people to work. And I will say they did an excellent job building an infrastructure that has held up with baling wire and duct tape, well designed, as I mentioned, the life expectancy. In 2011, the industry saw a total of 175,000 hours in lock closure time related to both repairs that were planned and also the alarming increase in unplanned closures of the system. And that's tightly connected to the operation and maintenance needs of this system, and one of the reasons why the Waterways Council was created. Our membership, we total nearly 200 organizations and companies. We're a nonprofit coalition that includes, as you would expect, the carriers of the nation's waterborne cargo, moving the products that are the underpinnings of the economy of the cities and towns of the Mississippi River, as well as our other rivers in this nation. Also, the shippers of grain, industrial products. Our membership includes the agricultural producer groups, manufacturers, power companies, organized labor unions, economic development, recreation advocates, and others concerned with our region's economic prosperity. And it's only a prosperous nation that can address the environmental and conservation needs of the river, and the Corps is deeply involved in that. And we recognize the role that has. Most of our members actually compete each other in their course of business, shipping and carrying, and the one constant is the need for a reliable, efficient locks and dam system, and that includes increased efficiency and expanded capacity to have the ability to look ahead and take advantage, again, this resource the river provides for us. There are a few immediate challenges right here in this area. The operation and maintenance cutbacks that the Corps of Engineers has been facing with will impact the Kaskaskia Lock with closures for the Kaskaskia is scheduled at 1 lockage per day that the industry will have to order up. I applaud the out-of-the-box thinking by the Corps, and as we always will, the industry is going to pull together to work with the Corps of Engineers, but we want to make sure those cost savings from an operation and maintenance standpoint go back to navigation concerns and navigation issues and not migrate to other programs, because we do have an $8 billion backlog in our infrastructure. The administration so far has not shown us a focus on this very important third leg of the national transportation stool. Our priorities aren't preparing for the Panama Canal expansion and the market opportunities that can afford us. We're not even keeping the status quo with respect to lock operations for the upper Miss or for dredging in the lower, for that matter. We need a sustainable river in regards to how it can provide for the low-cost transportation into the future. We're working with Congress. We're constantly educating them on the importance of positioning ourselves and positioning river transportation issues so we can continue to enjoy the many benefits they provide. And I've included on your chairs 4 brochures from either Waterways Council or the National Waterways Foundation, which talk a little bit more about the advantages in more detail. And I'll let you look at those at your leisure. But my ask would be that navigation be explicitly on your list of priorities as you move forward and set your agenda. We cannot assume that this transportation conduit will continue to exist, to be functional, be efficient. We've enjoyed the benefits, everyone has enjoyed the benefits for many decades, but it's time to stand up, recognize the resource, and establish priorities that include navigation. Industry and the Corps of Engineers looked at a plan forward to address the challenges, came up with a capital development plan to address the $8 billion in backlog, which, by the way, according to estimates, will create 240,000 construction jobs alone, creating hundreds of millions of man-hours in construction jobs, and creating and sustaining river-dependent jobs that I talked about, the towboats, the offices, the elevator, the plants. Ultimately lowering the cost of needed improvements, reducing the time it takes to rehabilitate or construct the lock, and enjoy the benefits of that completed project more quickly. More efficient navigation can be enjoyed by everybody who flips the light on and expects, flips the switch on and expects the lights to come on, and doesn't think about the role that barges play to make that happen. We are working now on legislation. There's a House effort that started in March with Congressman Jerry Costello and Ed Whitfield of Kentucky as our champions, joined by 22 other members of Congress currently, and a coalition of more than 200 organizations have endorsed it. And we call it the Wave 4 Act. Waterways are vital for the economy, energy, efficiency, and environment. And I'll be very brief on this, as I know we're pressed for time. Wave 4 addresses the challenges hindering construction completion on time and within budget by establishing a nationally prioritized list of projects across the entire waterways system. Wave 4 addresses that $8 billion backlog, 25 projects over the next 2 decades that need to be constructed. If we go down the current path, the Corps budget it's projected we're only going to be able to address 6 of those projects, while the others await and languish. And simultaneously, the nation continuing to lose almost $3 billion in lost transportation benefits as a result of their incompletion. There's Senate activity that just started this month. Senator Lindsey Graham and Lamar Alexander on the Republican side, Senator Mary Landrieu taking the Democratic lead, and we are looking actively for more Democratic leads and Republican leads that are going to step up and help this legislation, which on the Senate side looks at ports looks also at ports. So I would ask that this organization consider throwing their hat in the ring with respect to legislation in the U.S. House of Representatives and the United States Senate, utilizing the most energy-efficient, lowest-cost means of transportation while creating and sustaining family wage American jobs and simultaneously addressing the issue of traffic congestion relief is sound policy, and one that we are poised to help you promote to our elected officials. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address the group today, and we'll take questions as it's available.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rhodey. Next, we have Mr. Dennis Williams Meyer with the Inland Rivers and Ports and Terminals Association.
Thank you, Mayor Winfield. Can everybody hear me if I just talk like this? I'd like to stand up. I've been sitting a while, and I know you all have too, so I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible. I'm just going to say one thing about the view. If you all haven't been out here during the break, walk out there. Take a look at this beautiful view of downtown St. Louis, the arch, the river system. It is just fantastic, and you can see economic development in our terminal facilities and our port facilities right here in St. Louis. A couple of notes. Thank you both. Very nice presentations and right on spot in terms of what we need to be talking about here today. I've got some brochures. I didn't hand them out. Have set them over here on the table, and I'm gonna point to a couple of these. I wear 2 hats. Inland Rivers Ports and Terminals Association is my nighttime job, I guess you could say. I'm the president of that organization. It's becoming more of a full-time job for no pay, but it is a great organization. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along. But I'm also executive director of America's Central Port, which is located just about 5 miles north of here on the Illinois side of the river. A couple of brochures that we've put together for both those organizations. One is this small handout here. It was alluded to here both by the Colonel and by Paul. There are some incredible savings and advantages to barge transportation. This will spell them out for you. Economic advantages, cost efficiencies, savings, and that sort of thing. Those are good things. You're going to see those over and over again the more you get involved in the river business. They're very good statistics to use, but that's in this small brochure. America's Central Port, we've put together a nice map of what we have at our port and terminal facility. This is what every community, every mayor that's here today, this is what your community should look like. We have today over 1,200 acres of property located next to the river system, next to the Mississippi River. The Colonel mentioned both north of and south of Locks 27, that last lock on the Mississippi River system. We have property that actually encompasses both of those. We're looking now at putting a second terminal facility in south of Locks 27 on the free-flowing Mississippi River. And I'd be happy to talk to you more about this as well. And finally, it's a flyer on the Inland Rivers Ports and Terminals Association, and I'll speak more to that as we go forward here. The Colonel mentioned low water. We've unfortunately, I think today reached a milestone. I might be wrong about this, but I think we're at or approaching negative 3 feet on the St. Louis gauge today, which is the lowest we've seen this year, which is the lowest we've seen in a very long time in the St. Louis area. It has done one thing, has brought a lot of attention, negative or positive, to the inland river business. There is a lot of, today, extra cost associated with transporting the product. We're light loading barges, we're doing what we can. The Corps, and a shout out to the Corps, a shout out to the Coast Guard and the operators who today are on those, the captains of these boats going back and forth. They're doing an incredible job keeping this river system open. So, and I know Mayor Winfield, we were talking about Vicksburg, Greenville, Mississippi, and all the problems that have been there with low water, just an incredible job. One other item of note, just from an industry standpoint, pushing hope. There is today a pink barge out there for not just breast cancer awareness, but cancer awareness in general. There was a major fundraiser here last Friday night. They raised over $170,000 for cancer research. This barge is painted bright pink. If you see it in your community, you're going to want to take pictures of it because it's the only one out there. It's Big Hope 1 is the name of it, but it's Pushing Hope is the theme associated with that. So that's good for our industry. I want to talk just briefly about back to our port district again. America's Central Port, we were formed about 52 years ago. We were the first really in the state of Illinois to come up with this legislation. Today there's 14 or 15 other public ports in the state of Illinois. We are not tax supported, and this is going to be pretty much the same throughout all your communities. Not tax supported. We've got a great opportunity. Today we're generating over $200 million in annual economic impact for the cities, the region, here in the St. Louis metropolitan area. One plant alone, Abengoa Bioenergy, an ethanol plant located on our property, it has invested $250 million alone, 62 full-time jobs paying about $60,000 a year today. Excellent paying jobs, all because of the river system, all because of putting industry back to the river, which is what we were in that manufacturing heyday years ago. Currently, and Paul did a great job talking about National Waterways Foundation, Inland Rivers, Ports, and Terminals today is looking at the economic impact. What is it? We want to be able to pinpoint down to the terminal level, down to the city level, down to the state level, what it is that each terminal or port facility has, what economic impact that has on our country. We are all educating. All three of us up here are doing what we can to educate our legislators. You all are doing it. There are so many organizations out there, but yet it just doesn't seem that they're hearing us in Washington. So we need to be doing more to that. Now to why you're all here. You want to do something with your riverfront. You want to do something with your port district. You want to hear about what can we do to make something better for our communities. We have 3 cities today that sit on my board, the 3 mayors of the communities that formed us, small Illinois municipalities, Granite City, Madison, and Venice. And I know we had some mayors here from Alton and others. Grafton was here, I think, earlier. Not sure if he's still here or not. But those mayors sit on our board. We also have the governor that appoints 4 members to our board. We get it. We understand. It's all about economic development in your communities. It's all about raising that tax base. We're not a tax-supported entity, and we don't pay taxes. We're a tax-exempt organization. But what we do is take the property that has been given to us in many respects, or that we lease or that we own, and in turn, attract that economic development to the property. You have full-time people in your port districts that are there for that purpose. It's all about economic development. Make them look good, and they'll make you look good. What I would like to say is if you've got property, if you have a port district in place, and a show of hands for those mayors who already have port districts in their communities. 1, 2, just a couple? Several. Use them. Use the port districts. If you have property that you don't know what to do with and it's not in your tax rolls, give it to them. Let them take it and get it back into economic production. Okay. There's no reason that it should be sitting there for days, months, years, or longer. If there's demolition projects that you can't seem to get taken care of or handled, work with your port district to get those done. Public port districts throughout the country, everyone's got a little bit of different legislation. State of Illinois is that way. Ohio, I think, has probably had one of the best setups in terms of their geographic entities that they serve in. They're allowed to go do economic development projects anywhere in the state of Ohio. They own the Cleveland, Cleveland Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They built that. That's port districts. They went together, issued the bonds, got it done, got it taken care of. That has nothing to do with the waterway, but that's economic development that has made things happen for the state of Ohio. They were able to keep Goodyear in the state when they were looking at moving down south to another community or another area. They were able to issue those bonds. They built a manufacturing plant and kept them there in the state of Ohio with all those jobs. The company paid back the bond issue. They now re-own the building again, and it's worked out beautifully for everybody. So use your port district. I would also say if you don't have a port district in place today, start looking at it. Inland Rivers, Ports, and Terminals would be happy to give you some guidance on how you do that, what the legislation is, who you should be talking with, who at your state, who at your legislative level, if you need to go through that process, and most of them do. We'd be happy to work you through that process and help you get there. They are just so important, so critical in terms of economic development for the areas, especially in these times right now. I think I mentioned all that. Typically very creative. You're going to find, because they work like a business, they are not supported by taxes, they have the mission of job creation and job development, you're going to find that they're going to get very creative. We, for many, many years, had an annual operating budget of about $1 million at our port district. We worked with our congressman, Jerry Costello, that Paul mentioned earlier. There was a closing Army base right adjacent to us, and he was able to get that transferred to us for $1. It worked out very well for us. Today our annual operating budget is over $7 million a year, and we've attracted 72 tenants to the property and investment of over $300 million. And finally, I'll just close by saying Inland Rivers Ports and Terminals, great organization. If you haven't heard of it and you want to find out more about it, again, the flyers are over here, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells Meyer. At this point in time, I'll open the floor up for any questions that you all might ask of these gentlemen.
Yes. Colonel and Paul, perhaps could you address the issue of sequestration, the impact it might have or could possibly have on your operations?
I'll take a shot at it. The shorter answer is we're not sure. The more specific piece is probably going to be, in some way, shape, or form, all of our civil works budgeted projects will be impacted. The level of impact, I really don't have a good handle on that right now, what that's going to be. The good news is that it will be less than on the military program side, which is much more susceptible to what the sequestration rules imply. But from a civil works standpoint, there will be some. I'm not sure how that's going to be spread out across all of our projects.
Which helps make the point. I mean, the civil works end of the DoD budget is a margin error. I don't know that we're going to see it get to sequestration. There's an amazing amount of optimism, if that's the right word. I just got back from Washington, D.C., and nobody seems to think we're going to go down that road. I don't know that I'm as optimistic as far as that goes, but the bottom line is I don't know, from an operational standpoint, what we've seen with CRs and reduced O&M budgets and so forth is, like always, the industry coming together and trying to help the Corps. It used to be we'd say the Corps did more with less. Now the Corps does less with less, and that's no reflection on the Corps of Engineers. It reflects the reality of the budget and the ability to keep things status quo, let alone expand capacity or capture market opportunities like they're able to do in the private sector. That's not a clearly defined answer you're looking for, but we're all in the same boat.
Are there any other further questions? Okay, well, I see one back here.
Right. I have a general question for anyone on the panel. Approximately what percent of the construction costs, first for the locks and dams, and then for dredging or operation and maintenance, is covered by user fees?
I can take that. There is a trust fund that was established in the early 80s, Inland Waterways Trust Fund, that's based on fuel tax of commercially navigable waterways, and it pays for half of all of the costs for originally capital improvements. That's migrated to rehabilitations and the dams construction and so forth. So half of it is from a fuel tax that the industry pays, and it goes into a trust fund.
Yes, sir.
My name is Scott Byrne. I'm with the Carpenters District Council out of St. Louis. As Paul reiterated, the infrastructure of these locks are hard. Spent a couple of trips up and down the river on barge tours, seeing it myself. I represent about 25,000 carpenters out of the local district council here out of the state of Missouri and southern Illinois. Okay, some of those same guys that are sitting at home, we hope to put back to work someday. And I think this Wave 4 bill is the direction to go. I'd encourage the mayors, distinguished mayors that are here, to get on board with our Waterways Council. Our district council is a member of that as well. We support that. Wave 4 bill is going to open this up. It's going to put about $8 million worth of backlog work back out there and put these construction workers back to work. So I'd encourage the mayors to jump on board with the Waterways Council.
Are there any other further questions? Well, one thing I will say in closing, we certainly appreciate each of you gentlemen coming forth and being willing to give input and to travel here to talk about how we as mayors are able to assist in the forward progress of maintaining navigable waters. And we've had some brief discussions on the bill. I suggest that everyone do their research and then contact our senators and our congressmen to talk about the pros of passing such legislation. And at this point in time, I think we're ready for a break. I think we started a little bit late, so maybe we can take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll yield to the mayor of Davenport,